What happens is when people haven't committed to a decision, they're not going to have the courage to hold one another accountable for the behavior that goes with it. They're not going to have the courage to hold one another accountable. Notice what I said there. I didn't say the leader holding them accountable. I said them holding one another accountable. You see, on great teams, accountability is peer-to-peer. Peer pressure in your organization is the best kind of accountability. You want people turning to one another. What's the opposite of that? Is when people see a team member not supporting something, they go, oh, hey boss, I want to tell you, she's not supporting this. Don't tell her it was me that told you, but I just want you to know. Then the boss is like, oh great, I get to go. And he goes to that person, hey, I understand you're not doing it. Who told you that? Oh, don't worry about who told you. I just want to, and now they're wondering who ratted them out, and there's all this politics. And the only way to create an environment where people will hold each other accountable is if we as leaders are willing to confront difficult issues. See, the irony is, if I as a leader am willing to confront people, then people know, well, he's going to do it anyway, we might as well do it for each other. But if I as a leader do not like to hold people accountable, and let me tell you something, I don't. I'm bad at this one. This is my problem as a leader. I'm very aware of that. I do not like to hold people accountable. You know what that means? My team isn't going to do it. Why should they do it? Pat's going to let you off the hook anyway. See, the irony is, by me not being willing to, they're not going to do it. By the way, there's a technical term for people who don't like to hold their folks accountable. I don't know if you've ever studied graduate level psychology or business, but I'm what's called a wuss. Okay? And you know what's funny? Most of the leaders I work with are also wusses. Most of them don't think so. In fact, most CEOs I work with will say, well, Pat, I don't have a problem with accountability. Let's just move right on to the next thing. And I'm like, well, that's great to know. Why do you say that, though? And they say, well, because I fire people all the time. I mean, I fired a guy just last week. Pick someone. I'll fire him right now just to prove it to you. Of course, firing someone is often the last act of cowardice, not accountability. Sometimes it's necessary. Oh, I know that. See, I don't like holding people accountable. And I used to think it was because I cared so much about my employees that I didn't want them to feel bad. And one day I realized it was selfishness that kept me from doing that, because I didn't want them to blame me for feeling bad, and I didn't want to be around them when they did. Okay, you know who taught me the brilliance of and the importance of accountability? My son Connor. He's a management guru. But he's 15. But don't think I'm taking management advice from a 15-year-old, a teenager. He was 7 when he taught this to me. So Connor's a twin, and him and his brother Matthew got put into timeout. Matthew got put into timeout as I was getting ready to tell bedtime stories. So he had to leave the room, and I'm in the bunk bed with Connor telling him a bedtime story. About halfway through, Matthew comes back into the room and says, are you guys not done yet? And I said, no, we're halfway through the story. And like any good 7-year-old, he says, can I stay for the second half? Like any dad who's been around the block before, I say, sure, come on in, because I'm a wuss. So I start to tell the story. My wife comes in, Laura, thankfully not a wuss, and she says, what's he doing in here? And I'm like, well, he missed the first half. I thought he could stay for the second. She goes, no, Matt, you're out of here. You're in timeout. So Matthew does the walk of shame. The emotional guy that I am, I feel really bad for him. I feel sad that I put him through that. I turn around. Connor, my 7-year-old son, looks at me, and he says this, and he did. Dad, if you don't hold him accountable, he's never going to learn the consequences of his actions. Wah, wah, wah. 7 years old lecturing me, a management expert, about the need to hold people accountable. Here's the truth, though, and here's how I learned it. If we love someone, and I hope you love the people that work for you, you owe it to them to hold them accountable, even if they don't love you back for it. Many times they are not going to. We know this as parents, but we get in a working environment, we think, I don't really want to do that. We have to love someone enough, talk about selfless love, that we will hold them accountable even if they injure us.